Commence primary ignition.
I'm just not the hero type, clearly.
What a piece of junk.
Enterprise, this is the captain.
I got a bad feeling about this.
It's all part of the plan.
Engage.
Welcome back to Podcast 2 for 1. I'm your host, Donovan Thompson, with my co-host,
Daniel Wingfield.
and we're back
Bruce
again today.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, God
sorry.
damn, man.
What?
I just totally messed it up. You did that pause, and I didn't know if you were going to introduce me, if I was supposed to introduce myself. You want to start over? Should we start over?
No, we're going to keep this in the podcast.
Yeah, exactly. We
We're
want
keeping
everyone
it. We
to
don't-
know how bad you messed up, Bruce.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's cool.
We are back again today with none other than Dr. Bruce Hutchinson.
Yeah, I'm glad to be back. 2 episodes in a row. I don't know.
I know you're. Yeah,
So
well,
you might have to change the name of the podcast to 3 for 1.
Oh,
That's true.
Got him.
Yeah. Did you do something in between?
we did.
Yeah.
We did.
We recorded it
Sorry.
before the So it was
Okay.
time machine.
Well,
It
that's
was-
cool.
yeah.
Then you don't need to change the name. Then I'm good.
That's close.
Yeah.
We got lucky. You know,
Just bought
yeah.
that domain
all
name.
that branding, you know.
Right.
Well, speaking of branding and sequels and I don't know, I was
Name
trying to make
changes.
it tight.
Yeah, I don't
Name
know.
changes. Today we were talking the Matrix Resurrections, and I couldn't think of a better person to talk about it with than you, Bruce. Just because, you know, I feel like it was probably a big movie for you when it come out, like it was for us, and also just for it's a big thing for filmmakers and just I think just blockbusters in general. And I'm really curious to see what you think about it. I know me and Daniel have talked a little bit about it already, just because we couldn't help ourselves earlier today.
Yeah.
But I'm very excited to talk about it. But if you didn't know, Podcast 2 for 1 is brought to you by Kapow Comics, located at 4047 East Kill Avenue in Sherwood, Arkansas. There they have comic books, collectibles, graphic novels, and of course, special guest appearances throughout the year. Kapow. And thank you. And if you haven't already, go to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/2for1 studios, the best place to consume the content. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, and leave a comment, and we will get back to you. We'll include it in the show, and we'll have a nice discourse. And support the channel.
Discourse. I like that.
Yeah.
We know big words.
I'm drinking coffee finally after 6 months. So Matrix Resurrections. First thing I want to do, guys, is get general impressions. Bruce, I want to start with you. Let's not go super detailed or in deep, but I just want to know, did you like it? And just kind of give me a little bit to bounce off there.
Yeah. Yes, I liked it. I did like it. I think that the Wachowskis were kind of in an impossible situation making this movie. I mean, and I think that's probably true of any franchise that's been gone for a long time and then is coming back and everyone's super excited. It's almost impossible to live up to those expectations. So, I mean, I think, was it great? No, I wouldn't say it was great. Was it good? Yes, it was good. And there was a lot of things I enjoyed about it. And there were some things that I thought could have been better.
Just before I get Daniel's impression, do you like Matrix Reloaded 2 and 3 Reloaded Revolutions?
I like them all. And, I get the criticism of the second 2, and I certainly kind of agree, things kind of spiraled and sort of went a little crazy, but they're still super fun action movies. I mean, I think it's like way overly critical to kind of pan those movies because, I mean, they're just really fun. Even, the second and third ones. I mean, obviously the first one was just this groundbreaking movie that I don't, kind of echoing my point, not only can a reboot be tough, but even the sequels, I don't know that anything could have ever lived up to the original. But yeah, I like them all.
Cool. Daniel?
Well, I brought a small illustration to show you how I felt about it. So this is a beer. I'm going to drink this beer. And then this is a glass for this beer. Now, you might think,
dude, this is getting
damn, that's
heavy.
a big glass for just this small amount of beer. It's almost like, what's the point of even having a glass? Why not just drink it out of a can? And you're right. Like, that's all it does. I mean, it's just like,
okay.
So in this illustration, this is the Matrix 4, and this were the good ideas they had for it.
There you go.
That's a little facetious. All I have to say, I was pretty disappointed in this film. I think the dialogue was pretty atrocious across the board. There was a lot of soapboxing and a lot of writing around Keanu Reeves that I just made me feel bad for him a lot of the time. The plot in the beginning felt pretty convoluted, and I'll say I've watched The Matrix 1 within the last month. Actually, I haven't watched the second two in probably 5 or 6 years, so it's been a long time. But I was just pretty disappointed, honestly. There was this like meta comments about studios forcing them to make sequels to the Matrix games. That I was like, what? I'm not sure. Are they like copping out to that they didn't want to make this, and like this was just a contractual like obligation or something? But overall, it just felt like a sequel that to me felt completely unnecessary, and just like I guess I like sequels, but I like it when it's like we found an idea so good that we can't not make it. You know what I mean? That it's like too good not to make. And I didn't feel like there was really much of anything going on in that department for this film. So yeah, pretty disappointed overall.
I do want to make one point along those lines, and I should have double checked this in research, but I'm pretty sure I'm correct about this, which is that Warner Brothers was going to make the sequel without them. That's how it was initially announced.
Well, then those lines.
So I don't.
It feel like they were just sliding their Warner Brothers company, maybe. Which fair play.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's part of why I actually liked that little reference in the movie. I mean, it was very on the nose, but it kind of felt like Warner Brothers was going to make the sequel, and either they could step in and try to make. I'm not sure they wanted to make a sequel, but I think it was sort of like, well, if they're going to do it, then we want to be involved, and I totally understand that. And I don't know all the ins and outs of those backroom conversations, and obviously, but yeah, to that point.
Fair.
Yeah. First off, if you're not on the YouTube channel, the best place to consume the content, you wouldn't have seen Daniel's little beer illustration or what kind of beer he's drinking. Don't tell him, Daniel. Yeah, so you have to go to the YouTube channel to find out. Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that kind of stuff. One, the guy who wrote actually Last Action Hero and recently Ready Player One, the adaptation on novel, Zach Penn, he was originally hired to write and do the like Matrix, whatever is going to be. Really heavily rumored it's going to be a prequel with Morpheus starring Michael B. Jordan. This was like 2016-17 area. And eventually,
sounds great, by the way, just as an aside, I love that idea.
Yeah, it sounds like not a bad movie idea. Eventually, from what almost every interview ever with Lana Wachowski about the movie, it's always about why she come back. And it's about typically she lost her dad, her mom, and a good friend all in a close proximity of each other. And to kind of get through that, she ended up wanting to resurrect, some nostalgia, so to speak, and to kind of help her process through some of the grief. And she thought, who better than Neo and Trinity in that love story, and kind of help her through that. So that's why she come back to do it. And I agree with Bruce on that part. I don't mind that particular meta reference in there. As far as my opinions on the movie, I actually do like Matrix 2 and 3 a lot. I have some issues with 3, particularly like some ending stuff. But it's really like I love the action of those movies. I like some of the deeper mythology and kind of the mechanics of what the Matrix is and why it does what it does. I like all that stuff. I love the cinematography, the music. I watch all 3 of them roughly like once every 2 to 3 years. I watch all 3 of them. I just watched all 3 of them recently again. I just enjoy them. And I love the first movie. Like the first movie is a perfect movie. And I was 7 when it came out in 99. And it influenced, I think, like all of us, a great deal of just everything I love in terms of entertainment. Like it saturated the market, but then like anything, I've gone back and found comics that I wrote when I was like 9 or 10, and there's stuff I just ripped from the Matrix as a kid, so yeah, I really, loved it. And I feel like this movie, I really like a lot of the ideas in the movie. I actually kind of like the first half of it. But I think the filmmaking is what really holds me back on it. And we can kind of get into more some of that in a second, but the action is just nowhere near even like what I would consider a good action movie is today. And it's very far below a Matrix action film. And then the cinematography is just not good. It's not well thought out. And it's just like all that kind of stuff really holds me back. And it's really not even the story. I do have issues with the story, but if they just had those other elements, like if it felt like a Matrix movie, if it, it could have looked like a different Matrix, but had the same like intent and style in terms of, Hong Kong cinema and then also just like a classical look to it, then I would have been probably on board, but it didn't have those things. And it really bummed me out. And I just couldn't get past all that kind of stuff.
And I'll temper my reaction just a little bit. I agree with you guys. There were things about this movie that were cool and like interesting in theory. But I think for me, along with what you said, it's the execution that oftentimes gets in the way of those things feeling cool enough to be worth it, almost, for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, really poor. And we can get into that in a second, but I want to talk about what some of the things that we did like. Then we'll kind of get into some negatives. So Bruce, what's some of the things that did work for you and here's this one thing, a caveat. A lot of people are saying this is the best Matrix movie since Matrix 1. I don't agree with that, obviously, based on what I just said, but do you think so? And if not, either way, what's things you liked about it?
Yeah, I don't know if I would agree with that either. I can see why people who didn't like 2 and 3 would say that, but since I like 2 and 3, I'm not sure I'd go there, and I hadn't really thought through that particular comparison. And I think part of the reason it's hard for me to make that comparison is because the movie, part of why I like the movie is because of what it does with being a, whatever you want to call it, reboot, sequel, a requel. And, I mean, I found it, and by the way, I agree with, not as strongly, but I agree with your assessment in terms of the action and everything. I feel the same way. I think I just found it extremely clever. It just really felt like a movie of this time. And when I say that, what I mean is the way in which they handle creating this, again, the sequel, reboot, whatever you want to call it, because they do it at all these different layers. So there are obvious layers, right? There are obvious layers to bringing certain characters back. There's obvious layers to, especially the structure of the first hour, reflecting the structure of the first act of the original Matrix in terms of having to find Neo and pull him out, right? And if it was just that, it would sort of be average. But when you take that and then you combine it with all the other things that I thought the movie was doing, I found it really interesting. So, a lot of what they did was sort of, I guess what like they call in rap world, like chopped and screwed or something like that, where there are all of these, especially visual references from the original movies that have been put in this movie, but they're not in the places that they ought to be, if that makes sense. Like they, even tiny, small visual things that you would recognize from earlier movies, they take them and they put them in the movie, and then they do something different with them.
Are you talking about when they constantly flash back to the older movie? I'm kidding.
yeah, no, obviously that's a very obvious version of that. So just a couple of examples that during the montage, when they're making the game and, they keep sort of repeating. I really like that montage. I thought it was really well done.
I do too, actually. I do too.
But one of the shots in the montage is Neo eating a steak dinner, right? Which is a reference to Cypher eating the steak dinner, right? So it's like you take the thing that we had, but then you give it to a different character in a different context, and then you're sort of invited to think about what that's supposed to mean. And especially it happens a lot at the end, in kind of the grand finale, or not exactly the grand finale, but when Neo and Trinity kind of run away, and then they get to this building and they take the elevator to the top floor. And so that's, recalls the rescue of Morpheus. And in that way, it's similar because it's the same characters. But then when they get to the top, it's helicopters that are coming after them instead of them taking a helicopter to go after Morpheus, right? And so we see the Gatling guns of the helicopter, just like the Gatling guns that Neo had fired at Morpheus. And then you get the shot from below of all the bullets falling, but now they're in a different context. So to me, there's just a whole lot of like, you know, the whole idea of sort of taking this thing. And yeah, it's almost, you know, and then when you add all of that to the more obvious things, the flashbacks, the reference to the video game, I think you've just got this whole sort of meditation almost on time and ideas. And as you mentioned earlier, nostalgia and the way it all plays out, but plays out, I think, maybe in a more complicated way than it seems to on the surface. Because I think if you just focus on those flashbacks and a couple of the very obvious similarities, then you just feel like, oh, it's sort of a retread. But to me, when you add in all this other stuff, I think it just becomes a really compelling reflection on rebooting a movie and how the whole movie is dealing with sort of the repetition and cyclical nature of things. And we're doing the same thing, but we're doing it in different ways. And I don't know. I mean, to me, there's just a lot of really fascinating commentary in there that I think I might even watch it a third time at some point. But yeah, so that's one of the things I like the most.
There is one thing that, mine's real quick, Daniel. One thing, a good word that, and I agree with you. I like the echoes. I think it's the it's a word we use in Star Wars a lot, Daniel. Right? Is like how the prequels and even the sequels, they have echoes throughout the universe and like things kind of repeat themselves. I like a lot of the echoes and stuff. I don't know if it makes it entertaining. And that's the problem I have. Daniel, go on.
Well, yeah. And okay. I feel like I'm kind of speaking from like maybe, as a marginal Matrix fan. Okay. So like, I love the first one. I love for what it did. And I respect it, especially for like just kind of the ground it tread and what it did, and just becoming like an instant cultural icon that has been referenced constantly since then. I mean, the amount of bullet time spoofs and just everything is just, they will never end. They'll never end. And it's great. Yeah. I love that. I got some of those references you're talking about, Bruce. I got the helicopter. I got those kind of moments. I didn't get the steak dinner. And I agree that I felt like the movie was constantly trying to say things like at a minuscule scale. Like almost it felt like there were certain lines that were almost like, you're not saying that to us, you're saying that to the audience, or like that's an isolated line that doesn't really interact with the rest of the movie. But when I zoom out, I have no idea what this movie is trying to say. Like, I don't know what the message of this film is. There isn't a one, there's two. I mean, I don't exactly know what Neo has no arc. He doesn't learn anything or do anything that allows him to accomplish whatever he's doing. None of the characters, well, maybe Agent Smith has an arc. He's the only one that changes in the film. But like, I guess from Trinity and her weird meme Chad husband and everything, it felt like, you're right, that it almost felt like this movie was constantly on a soapbox, but every 5 minutes it changed the speech to a different topic. And so like, it was kind of like I kind of felt like I was drinking from a fire hydrant and be like, I don't know. I don't feel like there's a central theme. I don't feel like there's a central message or something that's carrying this movie to like, oh yeah, the point of the Matrix 4 is, I don't know. You know what I mean?
I'd say two things to that. First of all, I think there's a really simple version of the movie, which I actually appreciate, which is the movie just goes back to being a love story. I mean, in a way, when you really get down to sort of thematic plot, it's just a love story, and everything really services the love story, right? I mean, it's about a whole bunch of characters come together to help Neo try to free Trinity, right? I mean, that's really what the story is. So in some ways, it's stripped itself down. On one level, it stripped itself down to kind of a love story. And also along those lines, I'll point out that unlike the first Matrix movie where all of the crew die, here, all of the crew survive. And so I think there is a sense of, and if you watch some of the Wachowskis' other stuff, especially their Sense8 show, it's, and it might be cloying to some people, but it's very much about, love will conquer all kind of thing, so I think there's very much,
but I don't feel like that was I don't feel, I would have actually preferred it if that had been a stronger theme. Like if they had used that to propel again, I felt so bad for Keanu because every time he walked into a scene, the other person would just start monologuing and he would just say, yeah. And then they just monologue again. And I get you need a lot of exposition and he's a not new character to this world. He's having to be caught up on all the things that have happened and things that have changed. And a lot of that also is like, especially with Jada Pinkett Smith's character, you're revisiting a lot of the old movies as like nostalgic ways, or like, oh, look how we eat strawberries now instead of slop. But again, it's like, I don't feel like Neo figured that out, that love conquers all. I don't feel like he ever came to that conclusion, and that is what helped him convince Trinity. I guess like even in like the final moment where he's like convincing Trinity to come with him, she was basically already convinced because of like her dreams, and like it almost felt like, I don't know. I think the problem. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's simple. The love part is simple, but and I would agree with you about the there is too much monologuing, although people forget how much monologuing is in the first movie.
There's a lot in all three of them, really.
And Morpheus, but I agree with you. There was too much. I'm 100% on board with that being a criticism of the movie. But I think the love story is more complicated in that it is a lot about choices, and you're probably right. The movie, I think, gets a little pastiche in all of its 2020s messaging, that it's trying to do.
I'm gonna look up that word. Actually, can you just tell me what you meant?
It's a pastiche, yeah.
I don't know how to spell it.
I just turned a noun into a verb, but pastiching. But part of the love story is more than just, Neo has to go save Trinity and she'll be thankful and go with him, right? There is now this more contemporary, he's going to save her, but she's got to want to go, right? That is, she has to say yes, right? Which is, I think, a very now kind of approach to romance and dating and that sort of thing, and they're very clear, like, we're not going to pull her out of the pod unless she decides that she wants to go,
but I think, yeah, I agree. I think there is that level there, and I do appreciate that, actually. I know that you pointed out, I don't know if I had taken note of it, but I think when it's, again, I come back to her husband, who's like, literally his name is Chad, which is a meme. Yeah. A meme, if you're not familiar with it, like, Chads are like a meme of like people that like assume like, oh, those are just like the attractive assholes that gets all the pretty women. Right. Like that's like the meme, right? And he's very much the archetype of the meme. He's like overbearing, hyper masculine, hyper like, territorial and all these kinds of things. And for her to be like, have this like, you know what, Chad, I'm going to tell you what I really think. And like, then choose, it just feels a little on the nose to me.
I want you to play all the characters in the movie. All of them, like a John Malkovich thing. I could at least
surmise what they said. I wouldn't get the dialogue right, but I'd be like, this is what they basically said. I just think it just feels a bit like, it just feels clumsy, I think, a bit to me, or a bit clunky, a bit like we're not trusting the audience to come to any conclusions. We need to like throw it in their face. Like, look, her husband's a douchebag. And she's living in this like archaic version of a family where the women just listen to the men and do what they say. Also, when she gets a phone call and says, my son stuck a crayon up his nose, I've got to go to the hospital. I was like, what the fuck? That line was not written by anyone that has kids, because that's not how you would react to that. And that's not what you would do if your kid stuck a crayon up their nose.
I suppose it depends on how far up their nose.
Okay, fair. But she's like, oh, okay, I'll be right there. And there's like, oh, sunstick.
Real quick.
Yeah.
Hey, Daniel, what did you like about the movie? And then let's talk about.
I
what's all
already
the bad
said
things.
that. I can't even remember what it was.
I mean, there's got to be something you liked about it. I mean,
I did.
Bruce
I
talked about
like-
the meta-ness of it and the complexity of the layers. And did you freeze?
No, I did.
No.
But at the same time, I did. Right?
Yeah.
I honestly.
Well,
didn't-
here I'll say what I didn't like, and that'll give
ahead, please.
Dan some chance to think about what he did like. So
It won't. He's gonna
agree.
piggyback off what you said.
Not true.
Go
It's
on.
not true.
Okay.
I agree that the action wasn't as strong as it could have been, and the shooting of specifically the action scenes. The cinematography overall didn't bother me, and I did enjoy the mise en scène and some of the production design. But I agree, anything that involved action just was not nearly as good as the original movies. The on the nose stuff I have mixed feelings about, because I think some of it was purposeful and does sort of go into what the movie was trying to do, which I still want to get to in a little bit. But I also thought some of the stuff was just too much. I thought, like, especially like right at the end when Neo and Trinity return to the analyst's office and he's like super sexist, I mean, that was just dumb. I mean, that just seemed really, I don't know. I don't know what the point of that was,
Right.
And so I definitely felt that was a problem. And I agree. The monologuing got really crazy. I think in particular, again, the analyst, when Neo goes to Trinity at the motorcycle shop and
Call it not bullet time. Bullet time is what I call it. So
yeah,
And then
it's
they
like
then
so
they reference
slow
bullet time.
and yeah, and I didn't mind some of it, but the scene just drags on forever.
it does.
And it felt like, again, sort of back to my point about taking old ideas and then repurposing them. It felt like the equivalent of Agent Smith's, virus speech to Morpheus. It felt like it was another, like, we're going to take this monologue, change it up, give it to another character, but still have it be this really drawn out thing. In this particular case, though, it went on forever. And in the original movie, of course, it's intercut with action, and here it's not. And so it becomes extremely long and difficult to get through. So yes, I would agree. All of those are really fair criticisms of the movie.
I know what I like. I figured it out.
Go for it. The credits. The credits. Is that what you like?
Yeah, the end credits scene was great.
Oh man. Oh God. Go on.
I really actually do like the premise of setting up Neo in this new Matrix as being like the creator of a trilogy of Matrix games. I think that's really clever. And I actually do like some of, not all of, but some of the moments that he has with the analyst, who's like his therapist in the beginning, and Agent Smith. I feel like there's a lot of like just... for one, I'd like the actor that Agent Smith, the new Agent Smith is. I know him from Mind Game mainly, Mind Hunter.
Mindhunter, yeah.
Sorry, I've been watching Squid Game. That's probably the problem. I thought actually, like, I know probably some people think, I don't know, they may feel like it's disrespectful to the Mr. Smith legacy, but I liked him as Mr. Smith. I thought he actually worked pretty well. I liked the setup. I like the idea of like, let's make Neo think he's going crazy because he thinks this is real by giving it a real world reference that in our reality could potentially explain it, right? Like they're like, oh yeah, you spent your entire life making games and now you can't tell. I mean, you're going, a beautiful mind on us. You can't tell reality for fiction anymore. And I think that's really cool. And I think as a setup to how do we get back? How does Neo in the Matrix again, or how is he being convinced to stay in the Matrix? I think that's really smart and really clever. The execution was a bit rough on a few parts of that for me, but in general, I think that's brilliant. Honestly, I think that was really smart.
I do want to point out real quickly, I don't know if you guys remember, getting super academic here, but in our cognitive film theory class, we talked about a Matrix-like world or a holodeck type thing where if you went into a virtual reality that was so real that you couldn't tell the difference, when you came out, you would probably go insane. And, in real, like if we really thought through how that would work, and very few movies seem to want to deal with the repercussions of their crazy virtual reality worlds. And I agree. I actually really appreciated the fact that if you're in a virtual reality world that you can't tell from the real world and you come out, you will then now be unable to tell the difference, and you probably will go crazy. And so I like that part a lot too. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot I agree with here, and there's some I disagree with. I think as far as the good, again, I do enjoy the first half of the movie up until they go back to get Trinity, basically, which I think is like 1:20 or something. But I like the idea, like you said, Daniel, where it was a series of games, and he was a game developer and all that kind of stuff. I like that, and I like even there's like a line that Neo said is it seemed like they weren't trying to hide it at all, because they were basically incorporating it into my new life,
Right.
which I think is smart, because if Neo ever, if he was exactly, if he was the one and still had some of that power, then maybe he could have figured it out. If they kind of took it away from him, he might like try to pursue it more, but kind of put it on the surface level, it kind of questions maybe he's just insane, which I think all that's really clever. And
like that moment where he's eventually gonna get out of the Matrix, and the therapist shows up one last second in the mirror and is trying to like, listen, you are going through a psychotic break, and like he's like Neo starts being like, well, I mean, I could be. I mean, like in theory, you could be totally right. Like, and in our real world would be the case, right? And I think that is a clever way to use that. I thought that was good.
Another couple of things I liked. I again, my favorite things are the mythology building of it. So when he gets pulled out, it's one thing I was really hungry for, and they gave me a lot of, which was what's happened post Matrix 3 in the real world. And I love the idea that there was peace for a little bit. I love the little conversation about what I didn't matter. She's like, no, it did matter. Because we kind of had some of this recently with like the Force Awakens and Last Jedi. Force Awakens kind of comes in and says everything that happened in Return of the Jedi didn't matter, because First Order comes in.
Just repeating, right? Yeah.
Just repeating. But I like that. And like nothing changed. Nothing changed at all in Force Awakens, just the same thing over. The thing about this is that it did change. Even though it kind of fell back into another pattern, I love the idea that the machines went to Civil War. I love the idea
I like that too. Yeah.
I love that there's like sentience that can kind of come into the real world. I like that there's like probably bad humans that want humans to stay in the Matrix that we didn't even get to see, that we kind of got reference to. I like they're good machines, bad machines, good humans, bad humans. Yeah. I like that mix, because it feels like it's kind of like here's another thing, Terminator 2. They kind of made like multiple sequels after Terminator 2 trying to like nail it, right? And they kind of almost apexed it in Terminator 2, where like one of the machines, Arnold's character, he learned sentience enough where he kind of starts to care, right? You see like this emotional bond, and then they kind of just kept resetting it, and then every movie it was always about like just another machine trying to kill humans. They should have, and they kind of did in Salvation, but they should have made it well, let's have like a machine, like they're trying to come together. That's how you kind of keep, right. I mean, that's where we're heading as humans. We're going to become one with machines eventually, if we make it that far, which I doubt, but that's what the ultimate path will be, right? And like people have like phantom pain syndrome if you take away their phones right now, So I think that's really cool and clever, and I like that direction. And yeah, I think it's kind of what the things I like about it kind of end. As far as dislikes, again, the cinematography and that kind of stuff, it's weird because if you start arguing about that kind of thing, people are like, well, it kind of defeats the point of the movie, because the movie is a commentary on blockbusters. It's a commentary, like it is a new Matrix, so it should look aesthetically different, and then it shouldn't, it should play with your expectations. And I'm like, yeah, but also it's like if you're making a Spider-Man movie, Spider-Man should like swing on webs, and Spider-Man should stick to walls. And what I'm saying, like it's a Matrix movie. I do expect a certain level of action in it. I do expect a certain level of choreography in terms of shot design, and it had none of that for me in there. And like the Agent Smith fight, like every fight in the movie was so poor, and it was just quick cutting. It was like watching Taken 2 or something. A
lot of times they were in dark rooms or like dark sets where they obviously were just
sometimes
hiding,
honestly, it was really I felt the opposite. It was mainly just like super brightly colored, which is like, again, it's this new Matrix, right? But which, and to their credit, the end of Matrix Revolutions, it ends on a pretty like bright colored Matrix. Like here's peace, right? So they kind of kept that same aesthetic for this Matrix. I don't know. I just like all those kind of things really bummed me out. And a big problem I had with it was there's no physical, like actual, like embodied threat, right? Like the Matrix 1 had. And like Smith being that final confrontation. I think it's super weak to have them go on a motorcycle, dodging the swarm. And then the climax ends on the rooftop, which we saw in the trailers, which is fine. All movies do that for the most part. But it was just, there was nothing they did that like the action didn't like show you the characters growing or making like really strong choices. Like the final fight in the Matrix 1, that whole fight tells you so much about Neo and Smith, mainly Neo, and like the choices that he's making and why he's making them. Like that fight reinforces him becoming the one. Like he's choosing to fight. None of that happens in this movie. And I really bums me out on that. And there's even those other things like, you know, Trinity now has the powers, which I called day one, trailer one, which is totally fine. But it's like they're kind of retconning things. Like, I don't know how does she have powers now? X, Y, and Z.
I'll step in on. I want to mention real quickly though, because I think there's sort of an interpretation that she is now the one. But I think really it's more that the two are now one, right?
Sure.
That anyone has the capability to have those powers. I mean, Neo even says he doesn't believe in the one. And at the end, it's really by them becoming, you know, and that we even hear from the analysts, it's like, it's when the two of them are together that they create that power. So even though Neo seems like he's not the one and she is, at the very end, they're both flying and they're flying separately. So
are they though?
Yeah, but
I thought the whole thing was like he starts falling and then he's like literally dangling by her hand.
No, but I mean, at the very end,
doing this?
Yeah.
The very last shot of the movie is a mimic of the first movie, right? When Neo flies up in the air.
Okay.
It's a cool shot. Like I'm totally down for like Neo / Trinity being both doing the one shit, like fighting people. That sounds cool to me. I'm totally down for that. Yeah. But also in the original, like let's get a little deep lore here. In the original trilogy, he has the powers of the one because he has the source code of the Matrix, which were imbued to him by the machines to reset the Matrix, right? It's to repeat the cycle. So that kind of negates like that. Like unless they gave her the source code when they resurrect, which is possible. Right. But they didn't say that. But they didn't say that. That's my problem. Right. They need to say that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it kind of breaks what you said a little bit, Bruce, because I get the metaphor, I get all that kind of stuff, but it goes against what they told us in the beginning.
Right.
And because not theoretically, not everyone can become the one. The machines have to let you become the one.
Right. Right.
So this little thing like that, you know.
You reminded me of one thing I also did like though in the final sequence was I did like the whole like swarm being taking over random people and then like jumping out of their bedrooms to like dive head first onto them, like running in the motorcycle. I thought that was pretty cool. Like it was just like a good, like kind of creepy Matrixy, like, oh, this is kind of fucked up.
It's a neat idea, but it's not as cool or intimidating as the agents chasing you in the Matrix 1.
Yeah.
It would have been cool to mix and match. Like you have the agents still chasing them with the swarm also interfering. Sure. Like having a bum become a swarm guy is not cool. Like he just jumps off a thing. I don't know. That's what I'm saying. Like I really, even if they just had like Agent Smith at the end or the analyst fights Neo and Trinity she discovers her powers during the fight with him and they find out they're stronger together. That would have been so much better instead of going, she literally, like Daniel mentioned this earlier privately. He's like, are you doing that? And she's floating by herself. And then she says, goodbye. And then it cuts to black. It's like my brain almost like just fell out of my own skull when I saw that. Cause I was like, how? It's $190 million. To be fair, the movie started shooting like right when the pandemic hit. They had to shut down for like 3 weeks and to pick up back in that August of 2020. So I get like that happened, but theoretically they should have still prepped all the fight scenes before they started shooting, before the pandemic closed them down. So I don't know. It just really bothers me and it's hard. And like, here's another thing too. It's supposed, like, I can see this, like they keep saying they're not making Matrix 5. they had no plans to do another trilogy. XYZ. She wanted to do this because make her feel better, right? And it seems like it's acting as like an epilogue. Like this is the happy ending to the Matrix trilogy. And when it ends, it theoretically it's like, okay, they're going to go set people free or go kick some ass, whatever. So like you don't really need the big climax because how do you get bigger than Matrix Resolutions, right? With all that kind of stuff. But it's like, I don't know. I still think you need the physical threats, like the main physical threat to push the protagonist. And I also think like if you're not going to do that, then don't bring back Agent Smith and set up the fact that he's like, oh, well, I've got to go get revenge on you, but I got to help you out first. He literally says, I'm going to, do my own thing, but mainly some revenge fantasies. And they let him go. I mean, it's just like,
is he like theoretically coming after them now after he shot the analyst or did whatever?
I don't think so because he's free, or I guess he's
free to go where,
to do what he wants.
Yeah, which seems
Isn't
like
he a program.
Well,
Can not exist inside programs.
Yeah, but he's a program who's sort of become, whatever.
He's sentient.
Okay.
He's just going to go off and do what he wants.
Yeah.
I agree completely that as an action movie, it's very average, and doesn't really live up to our expectations of a Matrix action movie. And I agree with you that the ending of not really having a strong antagonist involved in the physical action makes the physical action feel less like the stakes are less high, for sure.
Yeah, and the thing is, I don't even want I don't need rain to fall opera music at the end of Revolutions, like with giant Superman fights. I don't need that. Right. I just need something to help put a bow on it, like even the Matrix 1. You know what I'm saying? That's all I needed. And again, it's like having Spider-Man not swing throughout New York. It's like you kind of need that a little bit to sell it, and honestly, it's hurting them. Like I think it come out at a poor time. Also, just the timing is horrible for them. But I don't know. It kind of bums me out. That being said, I still do want a Matrix 5 because now there's plot threads that are unfinished, right. and also I still like where the story was heading. I just think this was ultimately like a misstep on the filmmaking level for the most part. I still narratively there's issues. I'm trying to think. There's something there's one line I really do like, which I think it does kind of have some thematic stuff that Daniel, you said was missing. And Morpheus says, he's talking about either you can stay in the cell or you can go out on the ship. He goes, that's your two choices. But then again, that's really no choice at all. And I think he's saying when it comes to love, there's no choice. Like when it comes to people you care about, there's not really a choice involved other than trying to get to the people or take care of people you care about. And I do like that a lot. I still think the movie's kind of weak. I mean, Trinity, I was blown away for how much they kept talking about the love story, and she's in it for 10 minutes or 15 minutes, and she's mainly relegated to the coffee shop, just ordering coffee. I was kind of blown away by how little she was in it. She
was in the coffee shop, and then the rooftop scene, or I guess there's that the driving motorcycle
scene. Yeah.
I think she's in more than 10 or 15 minutes, but she's not in it as much as she could have been.
Which is wild. And I mean, I feel to go back, I still feel like I do like that idea of here's two choices, but really there's no choice at all when it comes to love. I do like that.
Yeah.
If it had just been reinforced as a theme throughout, I agree. If it had even if it just I don't know, at the moment of what if Neo had said that to Trinity, when he was trying to convince her to choose him or whatever, that even would have helped, I think. Just little things. I think that's my issue is it's for me, there's systematic issues because there's lots of little things that just are not executed well or don't feel like they're completely thought out or just, I don't know what they're saying. They feel convoluted. And it feels I feel like there's a lot of just small little things you could tweak throughout. It feels like this script was just on draft 3 and it needed to be on draft 13. You know what I mean? It just needed a few more workshops and a few more people to put their eyes on it and be like, hey, I don't know what you're saying here, or I don't get this. And it just felt like there was just a lot of little things. I agree with you guys. In theory, at a narrative level, there's cool stuff. And
Of course, you could
doing
say
some
the
cool
same thing
things.
about 2 and 3, right? I mean, although 2 and 3 had better action, I mean, which I think is why
Sure, which helps carry it
the
through
like
some of
yes,
those.
exactly.
But
But
this
I
goes-
think, a lot
Well,
of the
this-
same criticism, was
Yeah.
okay. You could
Fair.
have polished this. You could have done,
Well, this goes exactly what I said on our Infinity War podcast, episode 100, Bruce. You can get away with some narrative faults if you do badass shit.
right.
And they didn't do any badass shit.
Yeah.
So,
And I guess, and I know we need to wrap it up, but back when Dan was saying, what is this about? And I talked about the love story. I do want to just sort of wrap up going back to the meta aspects of it, because for me, I guess in a way it was almost like an intellectual badass stuff. I mean, that sounds too much. It's not intellectual, but just the cleverness of it was where
Right.
I got the pleasure when the narrative wasn't quite doing what it could have done. And I think that there's sort of this, like, the whole idea and the way that they incorporate the video game and the way they're rebooting their own movie and then they're borrowing from their own movie and have pieces of I think there really is this postmodern, like, there is nothing new here. And so it's just a lot of pieces that and then they did it cleverly, I thought, take the pieces and rearrange the pieces. And I just wanted to point out that in addition to borrowing their own stuff, I thought there was a lot of borrowing from other movies as well. References of different levels. There's a Star Wars reference, I mean, episode 4, when they're explaining how they're going to get to Trinity's thing, and they've got the little hexagonal, thing that they have to go through, is just, almost straight out of how they're going to destroy the Death Star. Early on, sort of, when they're going through the doorways, felt very much like Inception, in terms of, like, you go through a doorway and the whole world is now sideways, just like we had the spinning in Inception. Even The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises, I thought the whole scene in the coffee shop with all of the cops reminded me of, like, the big fight scenes with, like, all of the police fighting in the streets, felt very similar to that. There was another reference that we were talking about that I hadn't written down that reminded me that I can't remember. And then we've got all the, just the swarm just, brings in zombie movies, so it almost seems like.
and video games.
What's that?
And video games. Like, it's actually literally a video game mode in certain video games called swarm mode.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I think the meta
reference-
stuff.
There was that reference
sorry.
to after credit scenes where it was like, "Hey, do you like after credit scenes? Fuck you, fuck you, man." This is like the most pointless. Like, just you wanted to tease for Matrix 5? No.
Yeah.
What I mean? I mean, honestly, it felt like that. Which, to be fair, I can appreciate that this much.
Well, I think
So,
that I would be more okay with the movie if they kind of kept the meta-ness and, like, the uncertainty all the way up to the end. Because, like, the big thing about the first Matrix is Neo's, he doesn't feel like he's the one till the very end.
Right.
And I feel like if it kind of kept that, like, that's where the movie's most interesting to me, is him getting out and questioning his reality again.
Right.
If they kind of done that even after he got back in, then I think it'd been a little more interesting. But it feels like two different movies almost, like him getting out, him getting Trinity, right? And I think it's, I think that stuff's fun, but I also think I feel like they're getting a pass. I've seen this. I got not arguments, but conversations with people. They're getting a pass of being subpar on all these, on a lot of execution and ideas, because they're mimicking modern stuff. I'm like, well, if you're going to mimic modern stuff, and that's part of the inside joke, then, like, don't do it. Like why do you want to be mediocre? Why would you?
Well, and by the way, I will say that in my appreciation of sort of this fragmentary borrowing from everything, recycling thing, I don't apply that to the actual style of shooting. I don't buy that argument either. I don't buy that you shot it in a mediocre way to reflect mediocre movies. I mean, that's.
But there's tons of people. There's people saying that, which blows my mind.
That's a ridiculous argument. I completely agree.
Yeah, I don't know.
There's a lot of movies that pay homage to bad movies, if that's the case. Yeah, they're all just referencing each other.
I was just, my next movie, I'm like, well, I was trying to pay homage to Matrix Resurrections. Oh my
Did you
god!
see how that action looked like, student filming? I got you. I got you.
It did though. I remember when we finished it. I mean, even Katie, she doesn't do what we do, but she was kind of like, I like the first half of it, but like, I just don't like that Neo's just like force pushing bullets everywhere. And I was like, me neither.
His thing is like this now. Like that's his new move.
Yeah.
And it doesn't look good, even just from a visual like blocking straight up sense.
I mean, it's fast cutting. There's no time. I mean, there's no restraint on holding on characters. It's because they don't really know the choreography probably, and they don't want to show that they don't know the choreography. I know he can do it. I've seen John Wick 1, 2, and 3 recently. I mean, like,
and
he can
to your
do some
point, the
stuff.
director of those movies is an actor in this film.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not just in the, hey, man, do you
Chad.
have any ideas here? Do you just like want to throw us a couple ideas?
Well, that's why there's no fight scenes in the coffee shops because, like they would have been better probably. So
he would have upstaged everyone. Yeah.
Can I ask real quick, my last question, and we'll get off here from both of you. If they make another one, which, who knows, they say there's no plans, but that was all that they're going to say that if it made $1 billion, you bet your ass there's plans in place. Right.
Exactly.
What if we go forward, what would you like to see from it going next in terms of either story or maybe just kind of leaning into some of this meta-ness, or what could they do maybe? Bruce?
Well, I would like, and maybe this reflects kind of what Star Wars tried to do a little bit, but I don't think did well enough. It would be nice to retire Neo and Trinity if they move on. And not to say that they couldn't be in it, but one thing I did like is a lot of the secondary characters. I did think that they had a lot of room for growth, so I like the new captain, and I like the guy who plays Smith Morpheus.
He's a great actor.
I liked some of the crew, that they felt like they were, even though they were kind of nameless, I couldn't remember any of their names. They felt like they actually did get some personality that you could build on for future movies that didn't really get built on. So I think it would be fun to, I could see a prequel, by the way. I mean, that prequel with Michael B. Jordan does sound really cool, but I could see just continuing to move forward with these new characters and just kind of continuing the story in a linear fashion. What's happening next, with these other characters.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. It's a struggle for me to find something that I'm like, I want to see what happens next when it comes to this. I thought the secondary characters were fine, but they also just kind of felt like a bit generic at times, or a bit just like, oh yeah, here's the young snarky one with blue hair. Here's the Morpheus, but that he talks hip or like modern kind of thing. And so they felt a little one note to me there. And I think honestly, what I'd love to see is what Agent Smith goes and does. Let's get an Agent Smith spinoff where
keep Agent Smith for sure. Keep the new Agent Smith. That's another character. And just because honestly, he feels more interesting in this. Like he feels more of like, he is kind of this, he's a bad guy, but he's also not always being necessarily a bad guy kind of thing. And I think that was interesting, and I think I would like to see, like, I don't know what happens next with that potentially. That's me.
Yeah, I as far as the secondary characters, I thought they were okay for the most part. I think my only issue with them was I felt like a lot of times they were used to say things like, "Oh, you remember him? That's Agent Smith, and that's Neo," and like they had a thing going on.
Really fly.
Yeah.
Well, just some weird, like, I don't know, some weird, like, audience question stuff. I don't know. It's like, I feel like we didn't need that kind of stuff because I feel like if you're watching Matrix Resurrection, you probably have a decent idea of some of the things happening here. And I feel like in some ways like that, the movie feels like treats us sometimes like we're smart with like the meta stuff, and then sometimes it like we're really dumb with like the stuff like that. So I don't like that.
Is there anything here for someone that's never seen the Matrix? Could you possibly follow the movie like if you've never seen any of the film? I mean, this kind of feels like one of those sequels that's like you have at least the first Matrix, but really you need to have seen all of them probably more than once.
Someone needs to do one of those YouTube videos where it's like, my brother watches Matrix Resurrections and has never seen the rest of the movies, and then
that'd be a great video.
His reaction,
Yeah, because I don't know it's hard for me to like put myself in that perspective, but like
Yeah,
it's hard
yeah.
for me to think that you could get anything or like follow it almost at all.
Yeah.
Especially with the constant flashbacks to those films.
Yeah, which I love because I like to see the original movies. I was like, okay, I like to see these shots, But I think for me going forward, obviously, if they're going to do another one, they really need to lean into the plot outside the Matrix with the humans versus machines and what that means for the Matrix. And I like the idea that some people don't want to be unplugged, right? Like they need to kind of lean into all that kind of stuff. And what does that what does that look like? For the end game, right? Like what's the ultimate outcome for humans to coincide with machines peacefully? And because I like that stuff, and I want to see more about like what Trinity and Neo can do together and what that means. So I and obviously the big thing for me is like take your time and really focus on the filmmaking parts of it, and make it. I think it's okay to again feel like the Matrix. If you're called the Matrix, you kind of sound like the Matrix, you kind of look like the Matrix. It's okay to be the Matrix. And I think you could have all the meta stuff in the world and I think it'd be fine. I think it'd work really well. So that's what the things I would like going forward if we got another one. I'm very curious to see if we get another one, but we'll kind of see what happens. Daniel, how can our listeners write into us?
Listeners, you can write into bit.ly/241mail and let us know why we're all fucking wrong about The Matrix Resurrections and why it's the best movie that's ever come out and deserves all the Oscar nominations. I'm sure there's someone out there that truly believes that. And I hope you get the mental health care you deserve. So bit.ly/241mail and let us know.
Hey, no making fun of mental health issues.
Oh, I'm not. I just think it's,
I'm just kidding.
If they're that diluted, there's more going on than the Matrix, if you know what I mean. Yeah.
Thinking about it, maybe I would have had someone else as the new one. He's he's created the trilogy of movies. He don't look like Neo. He's just a different character. And then he finds out by the end of the movie after he's woken up, gone through his own the one situation, but make it different, of course, and whatever. He finds out that Neo and Trinity are powering the new Matrix. And then movie 2 would have been getting them out of the Matrix. You know what I'm saying? Or whatever.
And it's Michael Cera, right? You thought it was Michael Cera? That's who you wanted as the new.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
I
want Jonah Hill as
incompetent
Agent Smith.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I want.
Seth Rogen is the animal.
Yeah, it'd be amazing. Yeah. Yeah, it'd been great. Anyway, Bruce, thank you so much for being on the podcast with us. It's a great one to talk to you about it with, and we got a lot of good stuff and stuff I didn't even think about. Of course, I'm fixing to go finish it again just so I can kind of think about it some more. And where can our listeners find some movie breakdowns that we've done in the past, but other things like that on where can they find that kind of stuff?
Yeah, the hutchfiles.com, and you can also find me on Instagram at bdhutch.
Awesome.
It was kind of fun just to talk about our opinions on a movie, then try to break
right.
Exactly. Yeah.
It was
a technical point of view. It's just kind of
this is what we mostly do, Bruce. 80% of the time on the podcast is this kind of stuff with Marvel, Star Wars, and DC and that kind of stuff. So this is the majority of the podcast. So I'm glad you got to kind of come on and get a taste of that. Well, anyway, thank you guys so much. My name is Donovan Thompson.
I'm Daniel Wingfield.
And I'm Bruce Hutchinson.
And we have spoken.